MSW Media.
The rule of law is not just some lawyer's turn of phrase. It is the very foundation of our democracy. The essence of the rule of law is that like cases are treated alike. That there not be one rule for Democrats and another for Republicans, one rule for the powerful, another for the powerless, one rule for the rich and another for the poor, or different rules depending upon one's race or ethnicity. To serve as Attorney General at this critical time is a calling I am honored and eager to answer.
So now it's clean up on aisle 45 time. And for a long while yet, it is going to be clean up on aisle 45.
Welcome to episode 189 of Cleanup on Aisle 45. It's Wednesday, September 4th, 2024. We're already in September. My gosh. I'm Allison Gill.
Hey, I'm Pete Strzok. I hope everyone had a safe and happy Labor Day. We've got a lot to cover and get to today, including an update in the Arizona fraudulent elector case, possible legal problems with the Georgia Election Board's new rules and improper fundraising, and a new filing from Freeman and Shaye in their case against Rudy Giuliani.
Ah, yes, the repo man cometh for Rudy Giuliani. Plus,
yes,
we have yet, I know, I love Repo Rudy is my new nickname for him. We have yet another motion from Donald Trump in the Manhattan case in an effort to delay the September 18th sentencing for his 34 felony convictions, while Steve Bannon is trying to get out of prison early. No shock there. And another $1 million sanctions bill for, and I should not like a bill like a law, like somebody's been hit with $1 million in sanctions. Trump election deniers in Pennsylvania. We'll talk about that. But first, we have new patrons to thank. We have over 60 this month. We're going to thank you all throughout the next couple of weeks. And then, of course, we'll end the month with our Hall of Fame patron shout outs. We couldn't do this show without you, as you know. But I also, shout out to listeners, folks who just listen to this podcast. You help immensely. The more ears we get on these shows, the more ears get on them in the future. I don't know how it works. It's an Apple thing, but thank you so much for listening. But thank you to our patrons. You really, really make a difference for all of us. Robert Tucker, Robert Presley, Lenny Adams, Hopper, and Hildy. You are my heroes. So thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And if you want to become a patron, you can do it at patreon.com/aisle45pod. That's AISLE 45POD. All right, Pete, let's start with Trump's latest craptacular move to delay his September 18th sentencing for his 34 felony convictions in the election interference hush money case in the state of New York. Now, we already know, you and I have talked about this at length, that Trump has filed multiple times to remove Judge Merchan from the case, for example, 3 times to be exact, and he lost all 3 of those bids. We also know he's filed to delay the sentencing until after the election, and he lost that. And he's filed multiple times to have his gag order removed. And the judge did narrow it quite a bit, but it largely remains in place. And now he's thrown his latest Hail Mary. But in true Trump fashion, he Tim Tebow'd it, as I like to say. That's an old throwback about a terrible quarterback for all of you non-sports ball folks. But anyway, the Associated Press writes, former President Trump's lawyers moved Friday to halt proceedings in his New York hush money criminal case and postpone next month's sentencing indefinitely while he attempts to have a federal court intervene and potentially overturn his felony conviction. In a letter to the judge presiding over the case in state court, Trump's lawyers asked that he hold off on a decision slated for September 16th, on Trump's request to overturn the verdict and dismiss the indictment in the wake of the Supreme Court's recent ruling on presidential immunity. They also urged the trial judge, Juan Merchan, to postpone Trump's September 18th sentencing indefinitely. Now, Trump's lawyers filed paperwork late Thursday asking the U.S. District Court in Manhattan to seize the case from the state where it was tried. And the federal court kicked back that request on Friday on technical grounds, but Trump's lawyers could resubmit it, right?
Yeah, although it does look a little bit unlikely because it's actually really embarrassing for Emile Beauvais, who wrote the letter to the court. Now, since Donald has already tried to remove the case to federal court and lost, to refile means he would need to file an amended removal notice, and that requires a couple of things. First, it requires leave of the district attorney's office, meaning that DA Alvin Bragg would have to give it his blessing, and that's not happening, obviously. But he could also file it if he has Judge Merchan's permission. Now, that may be more likely than the DA signing off, but it's still a long shot. So Judge Merchan's ruling on whether the potential immune tweets and testimony from Cassidy Hutchinson are subject to presidential immunity is due September 16th. And Trump's sentencing is still scheduled for 2 weeks from now, September 18th. DA Alvin Bragg argued that the evidence is not part of his official acts as president. And even if the court finds they are, the DA says the evidence is harmless to the case and doesn't hurt Trump enough to be outcome determinative. Bragg left it up to the judge to decide whether the sentencing warrants further delay because the Supreme Court did not weigh in on whether official acts evidence appeals are interlocutory, only that questions about official acts immunity are.
Yeah, and let me break that down for you. What that means is you'll recall the Supreme Court had 4 holdings in their immunity ruling. Number 1, core executive powers are absolutely immune. That's why Jack Smith had to pull all the DOJ stuff out of the indictment when he refiled that superseding indictment in D.C. Also, second thing, official acts are presumptively immune. They have the presumption of immunity, and the burden, the high burden, is on the government to prove otherwise. Number 3, private acts, stuff you do personally, not immune. Kind of like Blasingame, right? Where that's the civil case against Donald Trump filed by several Capitol police officers. That was a pretty tight, solid ruling by the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals. So they're saying personal stuff, not immune. And then the fourth holding, official acts evidence is prohibited from being used at trial. So even if you're not charging him for bribery, you can't bring in the discussion about the bribery as evidence. So it kind of blows that all out of the water, right? Now, in this case, we're only talking about official acts evidence. A couple of tweets Trump made from the Oval Office and some of the testimony of Cassidy Hutchinson from conversations she had with Trump when she was chief of staff to Mark Meadows. Now, we know that appeals for official acts are interlocutory because the Supreme Court told us so in their ruling, meaning you have to rule on the immunity of his acts before the proceeding goes forward. It's interlocutory. However, the Supreme Court did not weigh in on whether objections to official acts evidence, like the tweets and testimony here, they didn't weigh in on whether those kinds of appeals are interlocutory. So Alvin Bragg left that up to the judge. You choose. But to remove the case to federal court is a totally different tactic, one that has already been denied by this court. So I kind of doubt the court will give him permission to file for removal again. You know how you said he has to either have DA Alvin Bragg's permission or the court's permission. I don't know that we'll necessarily get that, though there are new circumstances here, namely the Supreme Court's ruling on immunity. So the judge could be super cautious here and allow for briefing given the new circumstances. He may also rule out of an abundance of caution that the official acts evidence objections are or could be seen as interlocutory. But we'll know soon. But be prepared for the less fun outcome. That's usually how justice goes, especially with regard to Donald Trump. So this judge may rule, Pete, and I think there is at least a 50-50 chance, maybe even a higher chance, that he will say, you know what, Supreme Court didn't say whether this is interlocutory. I'm going to assume that it is and postpone this sentencing until this issue is litigated and decided all the way up and down the court. But then he also might decide that, for other reasons, like we talked about, that the sentencing could be delayed for other decisions to be made too. He might go conservative here.
Right. And even if it doesn't get, this long shot to try and remove it to federal court, even if that doesn't work, if Merchan decides to let that appeal go forward, we're still talking, we're early September, right? So if they just let the appeal go forward, they file the appeal, the New York State appellate courts take it, they take briefing on it, meaning both sides will be able to submit something. They might even be able to file replies to the submissions to each party. So you'll have the filing, the response to the government's response. But there could be up to 4 back and forths, probably 1 to 2 weeks between each. It wouldn't be unheard of if this unfolds for it to unfold in a way that it doesn't even get kicked back. Assume they say, nope, it's all good. Judge Mershon, you can continue to sentencing. That may not happen before the election. So, like you said, prepare for a certain lack of satisfaction, even out of New York State, before we have to go to the polls.
Yeah. And Trump's, one of his complaints is that the sentencing recommendations would prejudice him, right? But that argument is also unpersuasive. And I think Alvin Bragg pushed back on this because he's going to be filing his sentencing recommendations under seal. So we won't even know. If we don't get a sentencing on September 18th, we will not know whether the DA is actually pursuing jail time or not. We will only know when and if Donald Trump is sentenced. We'll see what ends up happening. But I always just want to kind of temper everybody's expectations because I know everyone wants to see swift justice. But sometimes it doesn't always look the way that we want it to look because you don't want is for Judge Mershon to say, I declare that official acts evidence is not interlocutory and therefore I'm going to go forth with sentencing on September 18th. If he does that, I mean, great. It'll be cleaned up on the back end if a higher court decides not to do it. They'll put off his having to go to jail until that is decided. But, the Supreme Court might come back down and say, yeah, no, sorry, it is interlocutory. You shouldn't have sentenced him. And therefore, this whole thing is prejudiced now. So we're dismissing it and vacating your convictions and bye-bye to everything, which I wouldn't put past them. So, you got to kind of take the good with the bad when it comes to the justice system here, because whatever Judge Mershon decides, I do have faith that his decision will be in the best interest of justice. Maybe not fast justice, but complete justice, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm. No, totally agree. And I think that has to be that way. And he's been, he has not been hot-headed at any point during any of this litigation. So I fully expect that same sort of caution at deliberate speed, not a rushed, but, moving ahead without delay will occur. But, even just the regular pace is going to take some time. So, again, do I think we'll see a sentence before the election? If I had to bet, I'd bet against it. But it's there's still a chance, but not less than even, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we'll know more in just 12 days when Judge Mershon issues his ruling on the immunity piece of this for the evidence. When he decides whether he agrees with Alvin Bragg that either this stuff is private act stuff and isn't considered immune at all because it's personal. Even though he tweeted from the Oval Office, it's still a personal tweet. Jack Smith in his superseding indictment in D.C. distinguished between official tweets and personal tweets. Meaning that what he considered to be personal tweets was him as a candidate for office, as a private citizen, trying to incite the mob to go after Mike Pence and to obstruct the official proceeding. But what he considered possibly official tweets were the tweets that Trump put out from the Oval Office telling people to go home, or that video that he tweeted out that took like 9 takes because he didn't want to say certain things. Or when Ivanka came to him as a White House advisor and told him to put out a tweet to tell everyone to be peaceful. Those kinds of tweets and those kinds of interactions could be seen as immune. And that kind of evidence could be seen as immune, which is why he wiped it and went to a brand new grand jury so that they wouldn't be tainted with potential immunity evidence, right? But you have to draw a line, right? Some of these tweets are for his personal gain. And so we might see that kind of decision here from Mershon. But like I said, we'll know in 12 days. And I look forward to sharing it with all of y'all when we get that information. So we have a lot more to get to today, Pete. We need to head to Arizona. We need to head out to Pennsylvania. We have a lot of other states to visit before the show is over, but we have to take a quick break. So everybody stick around. We'll be right back.
Hey, welcome back. We have more new patrons to thank, including Tammy Nelson, Kelly Beth, Christina Smith, Linda A. Ely, and Kathy B. Thank all of you so much for signing up, for joining the team. Appreciate your support. Couldn't do any of this without your support, and so wonderful to have you on board. And with that, let's head down to Arizona. Christina Bobb has stepped in it again. Allison, you'll remember Christina Bobb, most recently the senior counsel for election integrity.
Oh, yes, but indicted for election malfeasance.
Yes, right. For the RNC. But this story about her comes from Jimmy Jenkins at the Arizona Republic. The day after prosecutors expressed concern in a Maricopa County courtroom that grand jury information in Arizona's fake electors case might be made public, they confirmed their fears when they told the judge overseeing the case that an attorney representing defendant Christina Bobb had publicly filed a court document that included transcripts of grand jury proceedings and grand juror names. Before breaking for a lunch on Tuesday, Nick Klingerman, the head of the criminal division of the Arizona Attorney General's office, alerted Superior Court Judge Bruce Cohen of a, quote, urgent housekeeping matter. Quote, as we discussed yesterday, a motion with attachments was filed, not under seal, with grand jurors' names in violation of this court's protective order, Klingerman said. I'd like to approach to talk about that so we could get that taken off the public docket.
Fantastic. Yeah, I'm sure it was an accident, right?
When just like Trump's filings of like all our home addresses when he filed that dog shit Florida case. It's funny how all of these people managed to just like file all kinds of doxing information. Oops, didn't mean to.
Oh, every time. Totally. My bad.
Every single time.
So the court then took a recess for lunch, and after it resumed, Cohen confirmed the document, which used grand jury transcripts to support the argument that the prosecution of Bobb was politically motivated and had been posted publicly since August 19th, was now sealed. He sealed it. On Monday, prosecutors asked for an order to be imposed that would require the defendants to meet with their lawyers in person to review grand jury materials rather than allow them to keep their own copies. Prosecutors cited the Georgia fake elector case as justification, saying some grand jury members there received death threats after their names were made public. Though Cohen did not then rule on that request, he proposed a compromise of redacting grand jurors' names to protect their identities, making it less risky to give the defendants copies of grand jury documents. So I think what he's saying there is, okay, from now on, prosecutors, you redact the grand jury's names before you hand that stuff over to the defense so that they don't get them, right? Not relying on them to do the redacting because they clearly don't like to do that. Tuesday was the second day of arguments on several motions, including the defendant's request to dismiss all the criminal charges against them. Christina Bobb, an attorney for Trump's 2020 campaign, was among several defendants who sought to dismiss the case on the theory that it was, you'll be surprised by this, motivated by political retaliation. The party who is running on the idea of being able to politically retaliate wants their case dismissed for political retaliation.
And the person who is behind these filings of personally identifiable information leading to threats and doxing is, again, senior counsel for election integrity to the RNC, the same person, Marine Corps officer and attorney, Semper Fi or something like that, was looking at the wiki page. She ran for Congress in 2014 and came in last amongst 8 candidates out of almost 89,000 votes. She didn't even get 1,000. And more interestingly, later serving in Department of Homeland Security, apparently while she was there in 2018. Some officials expressed concern about trusting Bobb with certain types of classified information due to her being, quote, mega MAGA. So there you go. That's
you know how hard you got to work to come in last place as a veteran?
I know. I know. Attorney, veteran, served in Afghanistan. I mean, you would think you just like don't. One would think you could be successful based on that record, but it just goes to show that they find him. J.D. Vance is who's the freaky guy who went out like either Arizona and he was running I think for Senate or governor and he was like out in his car shooting Blake Masters. Freak shows. All these people weird, just weird, unlikable, unpleasant, unfriendly, loathsome, cheating, leaking, can't be trusted. She could have gone, maybe she could have had a spot down in Mar-a-Lago with D'Oliveira and Waltine taking care of all the classified, but missed that. But she was involved, right? She was there. She was party to a lot of that pre-search warrant going
she
down,
wrote
signed the attestation
letter, yeah. And she was actually like, I want to change some of this language because it's lies.
Yeah.
Like
this is my name on this legal document thingy, and maybe we ought to change it up. She that's like the Pennsylvania elector clause, right? That like I'm going to be just smart enough to change it so I don't get into legal trouble by the skin of my teeth.
Yeah. So even she was like, we need to change the wording on this. I need to say I need for it to say to the best of my knowledge.
Yeah, that'll do. That's enough. Send it, sign it, send it. There we go.
Yeah.
Now next up, this is from Zachary Cohen at CNN, going up to Pennsylvania, where a Pennsylvania judge, has determined that 3 2020 election deniers must pay nearly $1 million in fees. This is the result of a years-long legal dispute with state officials over voting equipment used during the last presidential race, according to recent court filings. Recommendations from the judge, who was appointed to serve as a special master overseeing the case, attach a dollar figure to sanctions previously imposed by the state Supreme Court against 2 Republican county commissioners and their attorney for allowing an outside firm to examine voting equipment after the 2020 election, despite a court order prohibiting them to do so, according to the new filings. This case, which dates back to 2021, involves actions taken by 2 Fulton County, Pennsylvania commissioners, Stuart Olsch and Randy Bunch, who sought to have Dominion voting equipment examined by a third party after the 2020 election. Many of former President Donald Trump's allies falsely blamed Dominion software for his election defeat. Thomas Carroll, who's an attorney who also served as a pro-Trump fake elector in 2020, was also sanctioned by the Pennsylvania Supreme Court for his conduct and, along with the county and the county commissioners, quote, shall be jointly and severally responsible for paying nearly $1 million in fees to cover the Pennsylvania Secretary of State's legal bills, according to the special master's latest report. Now, the state Supreme Court will ultimately use the special master recommendations in awarding fees and costs resulting from the case.
All right, so they're going to make the final ruling here. And last week's special master report marks one of the final chapters of the Fulton County, Pennsylvania voting equipment dispute, one of several legal battles over unauthorized access to election systems that emerged from the 2020 presidential race. In Fulton County, multiple outside firms were ultimately given unauthorized access to voting systems after the election without authorization from the Board of Elections. That's according to previous court filings in the special master probe. The third county commissioner only learned that an outside firm had been allowed to inspect the equipment until after it was done, according to the court filings. None of the third-party groups granted access to the voting systems in Fulton County were contracted by the county itself. None of them. None of them had the proper accreditation to carry out such an inspection. It's like the carnival, the Crazy Times Carnival audit in Arizona, right? With Overstock CEO and Pillow Man coming in to, have a look at the bamboo ballots with the Italian satellite interference or whatever.
Cyber ninjas.
Cyber ninjas. What a great name. In July 2021, upon learning of the unauthorized inspection, Secretary of State's office argued that the inspection itself had compromised the integrity of the equipment by undermining chain of custody requirements and access limitations necessary to prevent tampering. And that might have been the whole point, so that they could turn around and say, chain of custody is messed up. These have been tampered with. Yeah, it was us, but you can't trust it. The state secretary issued a directive barring county boards of elections from providing access to third parties seeking to examine state-certified voting systems. The directive provided for the revocation of funding from counties whose machines had been decertified under the directive and stated that Pennsylvania would not reimburse any cost of replacement for voting equipment that had to be withdrawn. The commissioners and their lawyers then launched legal proceedings. And during the proceedings, the state secretary learned that Fulton County intended to allow another entity, Envoy Sage, LLC, to inspect the equipment. The secretary sought and received a protective order from the Pennsylvania Supreme Court barring that inspection. And in January 2022, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court entered their protective order. And so Envoy Sage, LLC, just sort of backs my theory that they pick names for their shell companies off of paint chips from Home Depot.
Yeah, and hotel frequent stay programs. Envoy Stage. Hilton Ivory.
Yeah, I'm a Diamond Envoy Sage member. Thank you.
And so months after the Pennsylvania Supreme Court entered the protective order, the commissioners nonetheless allowed yet another party, Speckin Forensics, S-P-E-C-K-I-N, Speckin, to inspect the voting equipment without the knowledge of the state, according to court papers. After the completion of that report, the county moved to sue Dominion, arguing that the machines were not fit for their intended use and purpose. Now, when Pennsylvania state officials brought the action to the attention of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, the court issued sanctions. It ordered the county officials to pay attorney's fees and referred their attorney, Thomas Carroll, to Pennsylvania's Attorney Discipline Board. The court also ordered the Dominion voting equipment to be placed into the custody of a neutral agent. Now, unlike old Alina Habba being able to tap, Big Pappy Donald for her $1 million in sanctions down in Florida, these folks are not going to be able to. I guarantee you, Donald Trump Super PAC is not writing a check for these folks to pay these sanctions. So
now maybe they could ask to borrow the money from Rudy.
Sure, or Mike Lindell. Give me some pillow equity. Give me some pillow equity. Give me some shares. Give me some of those sweet Truth Social shares, which just as an aside, Allison, well under $20 a share right now. Plummeting as Trump approaches the date when he can, because he is the largest shareholder, but he is prohibited for selling them until a late September, I think
20th, 30th,
about
like
a week or something if the stock is above a certain price. But right now, in everybody's anticipation that he's going to dump everything he can and turn it into a penny stock, wise investors are out there. Unfortunately, there are a lot of unwise investors that are still keeping that thing hovering in the $19 range rather than the 19-cent range, which is where it really merits being.
I would love for these attorneys to show up and try to pay this with like some Trump NFT trading cards.
Trump bucks.
Or Trump
I got
bucks.
this Trump buck. Yeah.
Yeah. Here's 1,000 Trump bucks. Oh, no. Okay.
Look,
no.
It's $1,000 Trump bill of him riding a lion.
It says legal tender.
It says legal.
Right on it. But yeah, okay.
$1 billion Trump bill. He's on the cross. Yeah.
So Pennsylvania Supreme Court says you can't let people third parties access the equipment. Then after they issued that order, they let third parties access that equipment. And then the Supreme Court,
Speckin Forensics.
They went to the Supreme Court and said, dude, they did the thing you told them not to do. And Pennsylvania Supreme Court said, bang, sanctions. And so a special master went through to determine how much in sanctions and fees and costs to the county this would encompass, like how much would encompass the costs that they had to spend to take this to court. And they have come back with the $1 million number. And that is the recommendation the special master is making to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. And we will find out soon. I would bet money. I would bet $1 that the Pennsylvania Supreme Court will agree with this number or even make it higher. We'll see.
Yeah, and God willing, again, at least one of the attorneys referred to bar discipline, so we'll see if where
7
the
years,
Pennsylvania
maybe.
Bar lines up as we compare it to Colorado and California and New York and
Texas
D.C. All right, and Texas, yes, and Texas. Come on, Pennsylvania, step up,
Yeah,
Pennsylvania Bar, let's go.
Do it for all the lawyers and all the good lawyers in Pennsylvania. All right, we have a lot more to get to. We're going to head down to Georgia, but we have to take a quick break. So, stick around. We'll be right back.
Stick around. We'll be right back.
Stick around. We'll be right back. Stick around. We'll be right back. Stick around. We'll be right back. Stick around. We'll be right back. Stick around. We'll be right back. Stick around. We'll be right back. Stick around. We'll be right back. Stick around. We'll be right back. Stick around. We'll be right back. Stick around. We'll be right back. Stick around. We'll be right back. Stick around. We'll be right back. Stick around. We'll be right back. Stick around. We'll be right back. Stick around. We'll be right back. Stick around. We'll be right back. Stick around. We'll be right back. Stick around. We'll be right back. Stick around. We'll be right back. Stick around. We'll be right back. Stick around. We'll be right back. Stick aro Hey, everybody. Welcome back. Welcome to the C Block. We have more new patrons to thank, including Lisa Gosiaco. I hope I'm saying that correctly. Susan Carlton, Heidi Altman, Siv Sauer, and Lisa Butler. Thank you so much for your contributions. You make this show possible, and everything else that we do, including travel and going to court and going to January 6th hearings and going to the DNC. So thank you so much for everything. We couldn't do it without you. All right, let's head down to Georgia with the devil. But this time, Pete, we're not going to talk about the DA Fani Willis RICO case against Trump and his allies. We're all up to speed on that. Nor are we going to talk about Trump's appeal to have Fani Willis disqualified or her office disqualified, because we're also currently all up to date on that. Instead, we're going to talk about the Georgia Election Board and its members' attempts to sow confusion and chaos ahead of the 2024 election between former President Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris. Now, as you all likely know by now, if you listen to this program and the others, the election board in Georgia, which includes 3 members that Donald Trump called out by name during a campaign rally, which also just throws up all sorts of red flags, is passing all kinds of illegal rules, this board, at the 11th hour to confuse voters in an attempt to delay vote certification in Georgia and, more importantly, to just sow confusion. Now, they've been called out several times, including by Brad Raffensperger and even Governor Brian Kemp, who has gone as far as to ask the Attorney General, the Republican Attorney General, if these chaos agents can be removed from the board. Now, the law says that they can be by the governor with a hearing that has to have a 30-day notice, but we're still waiting for the official answer from the Attorney General, and we'll keep you informed on that. But in the meantime, Anna Bauer, who we've had on the show, Anna Bauer from Lawfare, who helped me tremendously to attend the Manhattan trial, by the way, found some interesting stuff going on with the election board. Late last week, she posted on Twitter, on Monday, an account that purported to be associated with the Georgia State Election Board appeared on Twitter. I reached out to the chairman of the board, John Fervier, or Fervier, I'm not sure if it's how to pronounce that. But she reached out to John Fervier to clarify whether the account is an official communication from the state election board. Is this an official account? Now, Fervier said the account was set up by another board member, Janice Johnston, without authorization. Quote, no authorization came from this board to set up this account. I'm currently researching the situation before any further action is taken. That's what Fervier told Anna Bauer. Johnston, by the way, is the state election board member who made headlines earlier this month after she attended Trump's rally in Georgia. And during the rally, Trump publicly named and praised 3 members of the board, including Johnston. The episode concerning the Twitter account underscores the increasing division within the Georgia State Election Board. Earlier this month, the Trump-backed majority of the board pushed through a series of controversial rule changes ahead of the 2024 presidential election. She then followed up later that day. Anna Bauer did. A little bit later, she added a tweet to her thread saying, it appears that at Georgia_SEB, that the account has been converted into the personal Twitter account of Dr. Janice Johnston. The account has a new handle, a new profile photo, and a new bio. The account name previously was Georgia State Election Board, and it's now Dr. Jan Election Advocate.
Almost the same. Oh, yeah, it's
Dr.
just a typo,
Jan.
It's a minor typo, Allison. That's all it is.
Well, excellent investigative journalism by Anna Bauer here.
Yeah, but that's not all. So after Anna tweeted all of that on August 29th, she then tweeted the following thread the next day. This is all Anna's tweets. A crowdfunding campaign that purports to be raising money for the Georgia State Election Board has received more than $6,000 in donations. The page claims that private donations are needed because Governor Brian Kemp, quote-unquote, defunded the board. I, Anna, asked the board's chair for comment. The state election board's chairman, John Fervier, told me via email that the board has no association with any outside group raising funds on its behalf. Quote, the state election board will not be accepting any funds that are raised by outside organizations or groups, unquote, he said. As for claims that the state election board has been defunded by Governor Kemp, Fervier stated that's, quote, simply not true, unquote. Continued, this is Fervier, quote, the state election board received the same funding for the current year that it received last year with added state-approved increases for payroll, he said. The crowdfunding page appears to be associated with Kylie Kramer, the Women for America First executive director and organizer of the January 6th rally at the Ellipse. Now, Kramer said that, quote, every dollar won't be refunded, unquote, if the SEB cannot accept the funds. Anna Bauer, received a statement this evening from Kylie Kramer while acknowledging that the legislature allocated $513,018 for the SEB in 2024, not defunded. She said, quote, not all of it has been dispersed, unquote. The SEB, she said, should be fully funded immediately by Governor Kemp's OPB. I asked Ms. Kramer if she intends to continue fundraising for the SEB on Gibson Go. Quote, if Governor Kemp fully funds the SEB, or if it's We the People crowdfunding, we will get the SEB the funds they need to do their job, she said. And as of August 31st, the crowdfunding campaign was still alive and now had raised over $8,000.
Department of Justice, if you're listening, this sounds like federal wire fraud to me.
I do.
This sounds like what Steve Bannon was indicted for, right? His We Build the Wall scheme. Send us money.
Veterans, right.
We'll build the wall.
Yes.
Because when you lie to people to get them to donate you money, that is fraud. It's fraud. That's why we were all kind of shocked that there wasn't a straight up wire fraud charge for Donald Trump's election lies. You know, I mean, he went for conspiracy against rights and obstructing an official proceeding, and those are great, you know, as well as 371, defrauding the United States, and the conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding, 1512K. But like, we were like, where's the easy slam dunk wire fraud case, or the mail fraud for mailing fraudulent certificates? Anyway, this seems like fraud to me. So I don't know. Department of Justice, hey, check it out. Maybe I'll tag him on Twitter under Anna Bauer's tweets. She's just so good at this. And by the way, John Furvier, he's a nonpartisan guy. He was like a Waffle House executive for decades. He was put on the board by Brian Kemp, replaced another non-election denying Republican on the board. And he's been trying to block the Trump election denier shenanigans. For example, he tried to block the Trump allies on the board from reopening an investigation into election fraud in Fulton County. Like, we want to do this again. Sort of like Jim Jordan's like little January 6th investigation of the investigators type situation. They were trying to do that there. And John Furvier, the chair, the nonpartisan chair, tried to stop that from happening, from that rule going through. So that's all this infighting going on in the election board. And we're really thankful to Anna Bauer for pointing these things out.
For sure. And two observations. One, we have too many Fulton counties, like Fulton County is in Georgia. I know there's Fulton County in Pennsylvania because I looked it up. And you know what Fulton County's claim to fame is, at least in my eyes? Anybody who is driven from the mid-Atlantic to the Midwest up through Breezewood, Pennsylvania, where your otherwise interstate highway system created by General then President Dwight D. Eisenhower, that you can go anywhere in the United States unimpeded on the highway system, except for the goddamn town of Breezewood, Pennsylvania, where you have to go through a inevitably backed up traffic nightmare of gas stations and 7-Elevens and Cracker Barrels and fast food restaurants before you get on the Pennsylvania Turnpike, and or vice versa. Fulton County is immediately adjacent. Breezewood is not part of Fulton County. It's immediately adjacent to it. So as you leave Breezewood, heading down into Maryland and towards the nation's capital, you will enter Fulton County, Pennsylvania, briefly before you hit
Maryland.
Maryland.
Have a new claim to fame now, which is that $1 million in sanctions.
Yes, because right, because the Aqua Hyatt forensics firm was paid money to go intrude. And then the second point is, Georgia, I love you for Lil Jon on the roll call at the DNC, but please, I beg of you, please do not screw up your state for this election, because everything I am seeing coming out of, in particular this, John Furvier is amazing, but at some point, the amount of damage that these three knuckleheads are doing, getting called out by Trump, by the way, because he knows full well exactly what's going on. I have nightmares about what's going to happen in Georgia from about, really in earnest, call it beginning of November, 1st to 2nd, for God knows how long. At least up and through January 5th or 6th, but We'll see.
Well, the good news is Democracy Docket's Mark Elias has been hired by the Harris-Walz campaign, and they have a robust team of lawyers that is twice the size of the legal army that Biden put together for the Biden-Harris ticket in 2020. And
maybe they can take down that website that the state of Georgia put up where you can log in to de-enroll somebody if you have their social security number. Just maybe we should make it a little harder to unenroll. Get some sort of verification that you're actually disenrolling yourself and not somebody else. But who knows?
Yeah, totally. All right, everybody. We have a couple more stories to get to. But we have to take one last quick break. So everybody stick around. We'll be right back.
Hey, welcome back. More new patrons to thank this week, including Philip J. Howe, Anonymous Buddy, Sal Rides, Erica Schaefer, and Tammy Comer. Thank all of you so much. Thank you for being on the team. Thank you for your support. It's amazing, and just couldn't do any of this without you and your support. So it's time for an update on everyone's favorite disbarred Trump lawyer. And Allison, this is like every time we can end a show with the Trump world, Three Stooges of, instead of Larry, Moe, and Curly, we've got Rudy,
Steve, and
Eastman,
Pete,
and Bannon.
Okay.
But I mean, there's so many. It's the Five Stooges. I mean, shit, we could do probably 12 Stooges. But Rudy, however you cut it, the Venn diagram of Three Stooges of Trump world, the center of that Venn diagram is inevitably
what
Rudy
we
Giuliani.
called him back in the day? We called him the Ukraine clown posse.
And it's still around, like sticking. So Simona Da, my accent is Sicilian. No, it's not Simona. She's back. They're
Simona
like interviewing. They're
Mangiante
talking about interviewing all these Ukrainian figures that are finally once and for all going to get to the bottom of the Hunter Biden laptop story. It's like, oh my God, all these people are still there.
They put so much time and energy into that. That's why they're so mad that Biden passed the torch to Harris. They're like, what do we do now? We spent all this time on the Bidens and the James Biden and the Biden crime family and the laptop, and now it's
keep
all
going.
Gone to shit.
It's like, well, we paid all this money for this crazy carnival ride, so we might as well write it, even though everybody's left town. All right, so let's talk about Rudy. Now, this comes from Clarissa Jan Lim at MSNBC. 2 Georgia election workers have asked a judge to enforce the almost $150 million defamation judgment in their lawsuit against Rudy Giuliani by forcing him to turn over his luxury properties and a host of other assets. In a filing on Friday, Ruby Freeman and Shaye Moss, the mother-daughter duo who won a defamation case against the former Trump lawyer over his 2020 election lies, asked a judge to issue an order for Giuliani to turn over his assets and grant them control of the property he fails to turn over, as well as the ability to sell them. Now, we might, as an aside, we might have to crowdsource. How awesome would it be to get a bunch of people somehow get it, buy it, and then re-auction it for and send all the proceeds to Act Blue and just just have a
turn
huge
it into a campaign
celebrity,
office.
have a huge celebrity fundraiser over this. Now, this is from the filing, quote, "Those remedies are overwhelmingly justified under New York law," the filing says, "and they are all the more appropriate in the context of this case where Mr. Giuliani has proven time and again that he will never voluntarily comply with court orders, much less voluntarily satisfy plaintiff's judgment," unquote.
Yeah. Now, some of the assets listed here that Freeman and Moss are asking for: a 1980 Mercedes-Benz. 1980.
I don't want to know what's happened to those. What are we at? 44-year-old seat cushions. Don't even think about it.
Full of beer farts. Various items of furniture, a television, sports memorabilia, including a signed Joe DiMaggio shirt. That actually is probably worth way more than any of that stuff. 3 Yankee World Series rings and 26 watches.
26.
What I told him what time it was. The women's pursuit of Giuliani's assets has been a long time coming. Freeman and Moss have yet to begin collecting on the money that Giuliani has owed them since December, when he filed for bankruptcy shortly after they won their suit against him. And he did that to delay having to pay these women. Giuliani is obviously appealing that verdict. However, during the bankruptcy proceedings, Giuliani's creditors accused him of providing false and misleading information about his assets and claimed he was using bankruptcy to avoid payment. No. But bankruptcy judge Sean Lane ultimately decided to dismiss Giuliani's Chapter 11 bankruptcy altogether, citing in part the disgraced lawyer's lack of cooperation in the proceedings. That dismissal earlier this month opened the door for Freeman and Moss to go after Giuliani's assets as a means to recover some of the money that they're owed. Some, right? Because they're not going to recover it all.
Yeah. So Giuliani has expressed no remorse, none, for his treatment of Freeman and Moss. After he was found to have defamed them, he continued to baselessly accuse them of stealing the 2020 election until a judge ordered him to stop it in May. At the Republican National Convention in July, he told CNN he did not regret his statements and likened his legal troubles to, quote, the Japanese internment, unquote, during World War II.
Oh, it's just
Japanese
like that.
internment. Japanese
it's
internment.
Just like that.
Just like that. In a statement to The Hill about Freeman and Moss's latest request, Giuliani spokesperson Ted Goodman on Friday accused the women's legal counsel of trying to harass and intimidate the disbarred lawyer. Quote, this lawsuit has always been designed to censor and bully the mayor and to deter others from exercising their right to speak up and to speak out. Unquote. Okay,
somebody,
That's
Kristi
exactly...
Noem needs to take irony out to the gravel pit and shoot it in the head.
Yes.
I mean, they're harassing Rudy Giuliani. The women who had to move out of their homes.
To deter him from exercising his right to speak up and speak out. Yes.
Who had the FBI tell him they had to move.
Poor Rudy.
Couldn't use her name in public anymore.
Decrepit Rudy. Yes. The brass knuckles bullied. Of Shaye Moss and Ruby Freeman bullying him and sending people into his house and trying to get him to sign things. And yes, being bullied like he's in a Japanese internment camp. Damn it.
Oh my God. I keep thinking of, like, I was at the DNC and how amazing it was. And I just keep thinking of that side by side with that video clip that went viral of Rudy, like, walking down the aisle of empty seats at the RNC and then falling drunkenly into the chairs.
Into the chairs, right. Stumbling, perhaps after a few too many martinis. I'm not saying that's necessarily true. It's
clip
speculation.
Just wraps up his entire career in one 30-second clip.
Certainly the last 20 years for sure. Right?
Yeah. And again, speculation that he was drinking. That's an opinion. Thank you. All right. Finally, you ready for this? Right-wing influencer, your pal and mine, Steve Bannon, has asked a federal judge to let him leave prison early to continue appealing his conviction for contempt of Congress. So he wanted to stay out of prison pending his appeal, and he did, unlike Pete Navarro, who just went right into the pokey because the judge wouldn't let it happen. But Steve Bannon stayed out for the pendency of his appeal, lost his appeal, got thrown in jail, and now he's saying he wants to be let out so he can appeal his conviction again. I'm not sure that you can do that. His attorneys have asked the judge who oversaw the trial to release him from prison before his scheduled release, which is October 29th, by the way. Quote, Mr. Bannon's case presents compelling circumstances because of the subsequent developments discussed above, namely the realistic prospect that the D.C. Circuit will grant en banc or issue dissents from denial on the core issue in this case, either of which would demonstrate that this case raises substantial issues and that Mr. Bannon should not have to serve his entire sentence before the en banc D.C. Circuit or Supreme Court can hear his case. They have heard his case. They've heard it. I don't get, and I read, because this quote says the developments discussed above. There's no cogent developments that were discussed above this paragraph.
No.
There are still substantial issues.
Well, and I think they're trying to tie it to the Trump immunity decision. Remember, Steve Bannon was not a government employee. There's not the one, a lot of the surprise to the president, not those people around the president. Two, Bannon was not like, Hope Hicks and wasn't a White House employee. It just is yet another pathetic reach from a pathetic man.
Even if he was the chief of staff, there's nothing here that Trump and his lawyers said, we don't give you executive privilege.
Right.
And confirmed that to the court.
Yes.
There's nothing that they could even claim. There's no evidence that could be even claimed as immune.
Yes. And this is about not a criminal prosecution or charges. This is about a failure to turn over material to Congress, a co-equal branch of government. So it's all such. Dude, there are so many triggered, whiny little snots coursing, running, permeating Trump world. It is just a constant. Name one that doesn't complain. I mean, maybe Mike Lindell kind of does. I mean, he's also like goofy, crazy, happy, but even he won't complain. All of them just whiny. So God Almighty, stop whining.
I have this image in my head from when I was about 5 years old. Pete, I had a neighbor grew up across the street from me in Talmadge, just outside of Akron, beautiful Akron, Ohio, and her name was Heather. And when she started to get real agitated, she was like 5 years old, 6 years old. By the way, they had the best basset hound named Rachel, who I loved hanging out with. I went over there to hang out with the basset hound as much as I went to hang out with my friend Heather. But if she was getting really upset by something, she would stomp her foot. She had these little chubby cheeks, red, rosy, chubby cheeks. And she would stomp her foot really loud. And they had these hardwood floors and it would echo throughout the house. She would stomp her foot and she would say, quit, really loud, quit. And then, it would that. And every time some shit like this happens in Trump world, I think of Heather and that foot stomp and the quit. And it echoes. It echoes in my head because that is what these guys remind me of on a near daily basis.
It's yes, every single one of them.
Quit.
All of them. Jason Miller, Stephen Miller, Donald Trump, Don Jr., Laura, Kimberly Guilfoyle, all of them. Alina for sure. All of them. Just whiny,
Steve
whiny
Bannon,
little.
Pete Navarro.
Cash
Remember when he wouldn't sit down in courtroom?
Eastman,
I went to see him.
Quit. Yeah, I don't even know her, but I can envision it in my head.
I went to see after Judge Chutkin set the trial date in D.C. In the courtroom. I went and saw that. I stopped in on Pete Navarro's little hearing with Judge Mehta, and he wouldn't sit down. And the judge is like, "Would you have your client sit down?" He's like, "No, Your Honor. He works better on his feet." And had to ask him several times.
Like a 5-year-old when you go into kindergarten and you haven't been socialized enough to get out your nervous energy, and the teacher finally says, "Okay, you can stand as long as you keep one hand on your desk at all times." And they're like prancing around the defense table with his hand on the table. Come on, dude. Where were you when the rest of us learned this? Between the ages of 5 and 6.
Oh, well, he's going to stay in prison October 29th, week before the election. He gets out week before the election. I imagine there will be some sort of shenanigans.
And he's still looking at, like, I'm convinced federal bad things are coming down the line. There will be enough, Allison, for us to talk about all of this for years to come. We're all going to be,
bummed. He was supposed to start that Manhattan trial this
episode
month.
738, and we're all like,
Yeah, after the Supreme Court got a hold of the immunity decision, Andy McCabe and I are like, well, this podcast is going on for another 5 years. But, this is it. Justice rolls slow, and it doesn't always look the way we want. But just know this. All of these guys are going to be broke, disbarred if they aren't already. They're going to have people come seize their assets every day. Nobody loves them. They have no family who loves them. Every day is going to be worse than their last until they shuffle off this mortal coil. And they're going to get beat by a black woman in November. So, I understand that you didn't get the orange jumpsuit visual with, a couple months in jail. You did with Bannon, you did with Navarro, you probably will with a few other of these guys. But sometimes justice doesn't always look like what we build it up to be. So never forget, their lives are horrible and awful, and they're miserable, terrible human beings. And they're if there's a hell, they're going. So don't sweat it. The justice has been served. And, I think that the civil system here has done a really incredible job. Whether you talk about Ruby Freeman and Shaye Moss, whether you're talking about E. Jean Carroll, whether you're talking about Tish James's $454 billion or $1 million, $500 million fraud case, the civil system has really done a number on these guys.
Yes, for sure. And, again, though, like we're seeing with Rudy, it has done a number, but it's still same with Trump and the Trump Foundation, and they have $1 billion with a B, fines up in New York. It's
Alex Jones
done stuff, but it's still rolling along through the appeals process.
Yeah, and it does take a long time to get paid, especially if you're up against somebody with a lot of money who's really good at hiding it from the courts. So anyway, thank you all for listening. Just the act of listening to this show really helps us out. Thanks again to our patrons, our new patrons who we shout out today, and all of our patrons who have been with us for such a long time, and brand new ones too. You make the show go, and we really appreciate all of the support. And we look forward to, like you said, episode 786 of Clean Up on Aisle 45. It's going to be going for a while, but we'll cover it all for you. Pete, do you have any final thoughts before we get out of here?
No, we're in September, right? A bunch of stuff coming down the pike this month. And, certainly on the federal side, which I'm sure you're covering in Jack, with what Judge Chutkan is going to do in D.C. We've got the 11th Circuit that's going to be, at a minimum, I think, hearing stuff back from Trump's side about Mar-a-Lago. We've got all the things going on in the various state courts, and, of course, all eyes on New York right now. So we'll see what next 2 weeks bring from Judge Merchan in particular.
Yeah, I think tomorrow we have a hearing on an appeal in the first E. Jean Carroll case, which is actually called E. Jean Carroll 2. Ask me how I know. There are a bunch of hearings coming down the pike too in a lot of these civil cases. And of course, we've got the September 16th, like you said, all eyes on Manhattan, and September 18th, possible sentencing, but don't hold your breath.
Yep.
But again, thank you so much, Pete. It's been great to see you. And we'll see everybody next week. And if you're a patron who gets the bonus episodes, we'll see you this weekend, where we'll probably get pretty sweary about a lot of stuff that's been going down. So thanks again. I've been Allison Gill.
And I'm Pete Strzok.
Clean Up on Aisle 45 is written, researched, and produced by Allison Gill, with editing by Molly Hockey. Our art and logo design are by Joelle Reeder and Moxie Design Studios, and our music is composed and performed by Adam Orr. Clean Up on Aisle 45 is a proud member of the MSW Media Network, a collection of creator-owned podcasts dedicated to news, politics, and justice. For more information, visit mswmedia.com. MSW Media.